After a little less than a week after the NFL schedule came out, I'm going to take a look at the 10 most difficult schedules out of the 32 that we saw come out last week. Now, I do have to preface and do a little bit of a disclaimer. This is based off of strength of schedule from 2024 opponents. So the win-loss record of every single team's opponents from 2024 compared to each other. And obviously that's going to kind of slight the rankings, a little bit in the favor of, I guess, in the disfavor of a few teams from certain divisions. But this is just how the numbers came out. The 10th most difficult schedule in 2025 is going to be with the Pittsburgh Steelers, a 52.59 opposing winning percentage in 2024, which again was the 10th highest in the NFL. It is highlighted by a few pretty tough stretches both in the middle and at the end of the year. You look at week 16, 17, and 18, where the Pittsburgh Steelers will have Detroit, Cleveland, and Baltimore to end the year. And in the middle of the year, you're looking at possibly 6 games where this could kind of make or break Pittsburgh's season. You have, if these teams in Indianapolis and LA Chargers are, to the point where we think they're improved upon their years last year, you have a 6-game stretch of Green Bay, Indianapolis, the LA Chargers, the Bengals, Bears, and Bills. And then to top it all off, the 7th game after that, you have the Baltimore Ravens. So, you're really looking at from week 8 all the way to the end of the year, you have probably the toughest slate of opponents between your divisional games, between, teams like the Bills and the Lions, where these are teams that are going to be vying for the Super Bowl. And it's going to be pretty tough for Pittsburgh, especially since they don't have a quarterback right now, to see them making it through with, that crazy record of Mike Tomlin always, he's never had a losing record in Pittsburgh. This seems like the year where that record might break. Next up is another AFC North team in the Baltimore Ravens. This is another team where they're going to have some out-of-division opponents like the Bills, the Lions, but they also are going to see the Kansas City Chiefs, the Houston Texans, and the New England Patriots on their schedule this year. And while the Patriots didn't have a great record last year, there's a very good chance that they are, have twice as many wins as they did last year when they were 4-13. And so this opposing winning percentage of 53.28, that kind of gets deflated a little bit when you talk about facing the Patriots. You faced the Browns twice, who had a 3-14 record last year, which, it's going to be hard to not improve upon that record. Baltimore, I think, is a lot more equipped to handle it than Pittsburgh is, though. They obviously have a team in their own right that's going to be vying for a Super Bowl. And I feel like this is just going to be kind of one of those tests where if they come out on the other end of this schedule with another 12-5 record or even 11-6, they're going to be one of the Super Bowl favorites and probably a dark horse team to make it to the Super Bowl. The Washington Commanders hold the number 8 spot for most difficult schedule, and while it does seem at the end of the year where you end off with 3 divisional games, including both of your Philly games, you go to Minnesota, you go to the New York Giants, and you host the Dallas Cowboys, I do see some moments on this schedule where we at least could see Washington kind of, I don't want to say take a break, but they can kind of gear up for that end of the year run. You look at weeks 5 through 11, even though the LA Chargers are going to be a tough team, even though Chicago might be tough, you do have Miami in there, you do have Seattle in there, and you do have your game in Dallas next year. So I don't see this as tough of a schedule as the previous two in terms of like how I feel. But strength of schedule wise, they do come in with a more difficult schedule than Pittsburgh and Baltimore. The team who is tied for 6th with the most difficult schedule in 2025 is the Minnesota Vikings. They are tied with another team at 6th with a 55.7 opponent winning percentage in 2024. A lot of away games in the second half of the year, and mostly weeks 12 through 16, you have 4 of your 5 games on the road. This is a pretty difficult schedule when you also factor in the fact that they're going to be starting J.J. McCarthy next year, more than likely, and it's going to be for his first 17-game schedule as a starting quarterback in the NFL. So not only opponent-wise is it tough, but incorporating J.J. McCarthy into the conversation makes it even tougher. The Green Bay Packers are also tied for 6th with a 55.7 opponent winning percentage, highlighted by obviously the NFC North games, 2 against Detroit, 2 against Minnesota, but some other big games that I think we should probably be looking forward to as fans of the NFL. Against Washington in week 2, against Cincinnati in week 6, you go to Chicago, obviously, and play against Chicago in almost back-to-back weeks. Week 14 and week 16 are the Chicago games. And then in week 17 at Baltimore. Now, even though this is, from a fan's perspective, probably a pretty awesome schedule to look at, I think from Green Bay's perspective, this is pretty tough to look at. I didn't even mention playing against Philadelphia. You go to Pittsburgh in week 8. We really don't know what they're going to look like. And you have some other games where, it's always going to be difficult to win in Cleveland. It's always going to be difficult to win those games where maybe you're taking your foot off the pedal a little bit like you would be against the Carolina Panthers. So Green Bay, again, one of those schedules where they're 6th in winning percentage for their opponents for 2025, but it seems a little bit tougher than the 6th most difficult. The third team that comes in tied for 6th with a 55.7 winning percentage for their opponents last year is the Dallas Cowboys. Now they, again, like the Packers, have their obvious divisional games. They're 2 against Philly, 2 against Washington, and the other 2 against the New York Giants. But then there's the other games like Minnesota, like Detroit, Chicago, and Green Bay. As they have the NFC North this year. They also have their games that just are kind of the random ones. At the New York Jets, we just don't know what they're going to look like this year. Against the Kansas City Chiefs at home, again, that's a pretty tough game for Dallas. This is a pretty tough schedule. I don't hate it as much as some of the other ones that we've seen. But again, with what Dallas is as a team and what we think they might be next year, this could be a pretty difficult schedule for them to make it all the way through in. The Super Bowl champion Philadelphia Eagles hold the number 4 most difficult schedule in the NFL. And this is another team like the Dallas Cowboys where you have your 4 games against your tougher divisional opponents. Your 2 against Dallas, who went 7-10 last year. Your 2 against Washington, who went 12-5 last year. But then you also have some teams who were either division winners in their own right or they were playoff teams in their own right. Buffalo, Detroit winning their own division. Tampa Bay winning their own division. Kansas City winning their own division. The LA Rams winning their own division. This is the kind of schedule you get when you're a division winner and you're a Super Bowl champion. You face the other division winners in the conference, and you'll get the toughest teams pretty much in the league every single week. It's a bit tougher this year because they also get the NFC North, so they'll get Detroit, they'll get Minnesota, they'll get Chicago, and they will get Green Bay. But then you throw in the game at Buffalo, the game at Kansas City, and this is a pretty tough schedule for Philly. This, to me, if you put strength of schedule aside, which I think is probably more realistic when judging the tougher schedules, this is probably in the running for the toughest schedule in the NFL based on, their away games, their games against divisional winners, their games just against really good teams in general. I only see one game on this schedule against the Las Vegas Raiders where you can kind of say that that's a cupcake team. I think even the New York Giants, they're not going to be the same 3-14 team they were last year. So this is a pretty tough year for Philly, I think, schedule-wise, and we might see that this is going to lead to them being not a repeat champion. The Detroit Lions, after going 15-2 last year, get the third, well, technically tied for second most difficult schedule in the NFL this year. And from the jump, it seems like a pretty, hard task to get through this season. 4 of your first 6 games are on the road. 4 of your first 6 games are against teams with a winning record, at Green Bay, at Baltimore, at Cincy, and at Kansas City. Then you follow it up with 4 games as well against 10-plus win teams versus Tampa Bay, versus Minnesota, then on the road at Washington and Philadelphia. This is a schedule week 1 through 11 where I don't envy Detroit. I would not want to be a fan of the Detroit Lions, because if we are, after week 11, if we are 6-4, if we're 5-5, people are going to be talking about this team like maybe they've already missed their window to win a championship, and maybe Jared Goff isn't the MVP caliber quarterback that we all think he is. That's just the kind of thing that's going to get talked about, Detroit, if they don't come out on the other side of that first 10-game stretch with a 8-2 or 7-3 record. The Chicago Bears are also tied for second with the most difficult schedule in the NFL this year, and it seems a bit easier, don't you think? I mean, there's Cleveland in there, there's Pittsburgh in there, there's the New York Giants in there, and there's the Las Vegas Raiders as well as the New Orleans Saints in there. That's 4 or 5 games right there where you should be able to win those games. And yes, there's the Detroits and Washingtons and Green Bays and Phillies that you're going to go on the road and play. But I think if this is as improved of a team as we think they are, I think they're going to be much better up front. They're going to be much better at quarterback. They're going to be much better at the skill group. If this is the team that's going to take the next step to make Chicago an actual winning organization, this is the type of season you look at. And if they go 10-7, 11-6, that firmly establishes themselves as one of the better teams in the NFL. Last, but certainly not least, is the New York Giants. Now, a team who drafted Jackson Dart in the first round, a team that drafted Abdul Carter with the number 3 overall pick. This is the type of schedule where we could see New York still within the top 5 of the NFL draft next year. This is another team from the jump. You're looking at the first 8 weeks on this schedule. New York doesn't get a bye until week 14, which I always hate for teams if they're in the last 4 or first 4 or 5 weeks of the year they have their bye. These first 13 weeks, I don't really know what's in the cards for New York, because I don't know if Jackson Dart's going to start from day one. If he does, this could look really tough for him after those first 13 weeks. I think it'd be easier to let him start after week 14. Get him acclimated maybe a little bit more, have him play 3 home games as opposed to play a bunch of games on the road to start the year against a bunch of playoff and Super Bowl caliber teams. This is really tough, and it's really weird to see one of the worst teams in the NFL has the toughest schedule in the entire league, but that's just kind of how the cards got dealt this year, and New York's just going to have to play through it and see if they can actually make something good of it.